In this video, I want to find out the truth about buying an audio interface for bass. Hey guys, I'm Tyler. Thank you for tuning back into the channel once again. If you're new around here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and hit that notification bell to keep updated with the latest videos from this channel. So this is part 2 of my kind of little series on audio interfaces, and in this video I want to do a bit of investigative work and find out what really makes a difference between these different audio interfaces. So in part 1 I discussed the things to consider when buying an audio interface, so things like the inputs, the compatibility with your devices, portability, what you want to use it with, and also DSP versus native processing, and then budget. And in this video I want to really do a more practical example and show you the differences, let you hear the differences between different audio interfaces and whether it really makes a difference whether you go for a cheap interface like this here, Focusrite 2x2, something more mid-range like the HX Stomp, use that as an interface, or move up to something slightly higher end, so something like the Apogee Duet or the Apollo Twin X Duo. So I'm going to compare these 4 interfaces and I'm going to play the same figure. I'm going to use my MTD AG5 USA bass. And then I want to do a little bit of a tweak to the test at the end. So for all of these, I'm going to plug straight in. So I'm going to plug straight into the front of each of these devices and just use their inputs that they come with and see what they sound like. And then I want to do a little bit of a curveball and see what happens if I pair the Focusrite with my Avalon DI and see how much of a difference that makes, and really get to the bottom of whether you can get away with a cheaper interface with nicer outboard gear in front of it, or if it really, the buck stops with the conversion, and whether that conversion really you can put as much nice stuff in front of it, but that makes the biggest difference overall. I've got my own kind of theory on this, and I think that the stuff in front of it will make more of a difference in terms of tone, but maybe the reproduction of that might not be captured as well with the cheaper interface. So let's see, I'm going to try and pair the Focusrite with the Avalon as the cheap end, and then I'm going to maybe pair that with the Twin X and the U5, Avalon U5, and just see if that conversion really makes a difference. So hopefully it'll come across on YouTube. It might not come across at all, and this might be a completely pointless video, but let's see. The audio does get processed heavily by YouTube, but we'll see what happens. And I'm recording all of this in 96K, and I'm going to level match it all to make sure that what's going in is as level matched as possible, and then I'll tweak it afterwards just to make sure that you're hearing the same level of signal. I want your guys' thoughts in the comments. Let me know which is your favourite, which sounds the best, and if you think it's worth spending the extra for the Apollo Twin versus just something like the Focusrite. So let's just dive into it now and get going. So as you can see here, I've got all 4 of the devices set up ready to go, so I can just switch between them pretty easily. I'll just change the device in the project and hopefully I can just plug straight into it and plug my headphones in, and I will hear back exactly what's going on. I'm going to go up, so I'm going to do it in ascending order of price. So I'm going to start with the Focusrite, then the HX Stomp, then the Duet, and the Apollo Twin. I'm not making any use of the DSP in either of these devices, so it won't have the amp sims between the two, just literally their clear conversion as an interface, just focusing on their converters and no other tonal colouring. So we've got the Focusrite here ready to go. I'm plugged in and I've got my MTD AG5 bass, you can see here, with a Purple Heart fretboard, the MTD Bartolini pickups, MTD active circuit. It's an audio body with a maple burl top, and yeah, Purple Heart fingerboard and maple neck. And I thought I'd use this bass. It's probably the most full frequency range in terms of basses that I have, probably the brightest treble, and I can put quite a boost on the bottom end. So I thought I'd use this bass. Could have chosen any basses, but I figured it would be worth trying something that had, covered pretty much a good frequency range rather than something that was quite dead or dull, or had no top end or something. So this is my comparison. So in order for this to be a fair comparison, I'm using the instrument level input on each of these devices. But for me, the Focusrite is a little bit hot on the instrument level. But I think it will have an effect on the impedance if I change it. So I'm going to just keep it on instrument level, and I'll just have to bring it down a little bit when it comes to the mix down, just bring it back to where I like it. It typically should be kind of between -18 and -12 dB at the most. And this is kind of going a little bit above that, kind of hitting -9. and that's with the level gain all the way down on the interface. Other thing I noticed is that the headphones aren't really producing that much volume, so I've got it cranked quite high. These are hard to drive, but it says to me that the headphone amp in the Focusrite is not that powerful. So here's a sample of the Focusrite with the MTD. Now I'm going to switch over to the HX Stomp. So I've switched over now to the HX Stomp. My initial impressions are that I think I prefer the sound of the HX Stomp, just clean on its own, but let's have a listen. I'm going to play some back into this and let's see. So that's the Stomp. My initial impression is that that just felt more comfortable. The sound felt nicer to me. Felt like it was right to me. But I'll go back and listen to all of these with SonarWorks reference turned on, and just get a perspective of all of them and how they differ in proper settings with headphones that are not just with their default frequency response. The SonarWorks software will balance it out, flatten it out, so I get a real crisp, clear representation of exactly how these sound in the real world with a flat, neutral tone from the headphones. So here we go. Now I'll move to the Apogee Duet. I'm currently plugged into instrument 1 on the input on the Duet breakout box, and the headphones are going straight into the Duet itself, and so I can now just tweak it within Logic rather than have to use anything separate on the device or anything like that. So let's do another test with the Apogee Duet. So that's the Apogee Duet. One thing I would say about that is that the level of gain you get from an Apogee is so much. There's so much gain there available for the input. So I turned it right down. I was on actually 0 gain on the input. Just an amazing amount of headroom on the gain. And that really helps with microphones like the SM7B and things like that. But in this case, it sounded good. I'm not sure if it sounded that much different to the HX Stomp to my ears. Listening back will be interesting. But I was able to get a better level with that one, more balanced level, just straight through, kind of more in the 18 to 12, minus 18 to 12 dB range, which is what you want. You want that headroom so that you can do stuff with the sound. Always better to have that headroom and turn something up than it is to have something way too loud, distort, and then you can't get rid of the distortion. So I'm now, as you can see, switched over here into the Apollo Twin X Duo. This is the most expensive out of the interfaces here. The one thing I do love about the Apollo Twin is the ability just to change everything you need on the device itself. Very hardware orientated, and I really enjoy that. As you guys who've seen my Helix videos know, I like to get into the actual device itself rather than software, so that's a bit of a plus for me. But we're using this just clean, so into the DI input down here. So it does have a dedicated DI input on this device, which is a great little feature, and that's just straight in there. I've got nothing in the console, and this is just clean DI straight through. So here we go, here's the Apollo. So I have the Avalon U5 plugged into the Focusrite 2i2. The real test of this is just to see if that DI makes a big difference. Obviously the Apollo's got a DI built into it, and does that make a difference versus the Focusrite using just a combi jack with an instrument level? Same for the Apogee Duet really. Is it the Duet that makes the difference? Is it worth getting a cheaper interface and a nicer DI or a nicer preamp, or are you better off just having a nicer interface altogether? So here we go, this is the Focusrite with the Avalon. So that was the Focusrite of the Avalon, definitely the sonic signature I could hear playing back of the Avalon more than anything else. I'm now going to try the same setup with the Apollo Twin. So we have the Apollo Twin and the Avalon. Having done the Focusrite and the Apollo, I'd like to also just see what the Apogee sounds like with the Avalon as well, so we get that comparison of all of them. The Helix I won't do because it requires a different set of leads and combination, but I think it will be interesting to see anyway, to hear the difference between these three with the DI. This is the Avalon with the Apogee Duet. So I went away and just had some dinner in this little gap. So it would have just been a second in your life, but it's been a couple of hours in mine. And I came back to listen to the audio files from earlier, just to kind of have a really objective view, take away the playing, take away how I felt while I was playing them. And now I'm going to give you my feedback on the different audio files that I heard and what I think of each of them. The first thing I'd say is that initially it's really hard to tell the difference between any of them if you just look at them and just don't really think about it too much. There is a difference from the Focusrite up to the UAD, and I kind of felt a little bit of a split. So I kind of felt a difference between Focusrite and HX Stomp together, and then the Apogee and the UAD on first listen. And then when I started to delve into it a little bit deeper and listen a few more times, I then started to pick out more of the nuances. But I think what's really interesting is that it took me that long to do it. So it does say that there is, there's definitely a level that all of these interfaces meet, and it's not like one just way is just behind or one is way out in front. But as I say, I do think there is a split between the bottom two and the top two. With the Focusrite, I think on its own, it's kind of bland sounding and not very exciting sounding, but I think it's made worse by the fact that you then compare it to the other interfaces like the Stomp and so on. And I think that's what makes it sound that way. The thing that I thought about it was that it seemed to kind of give her an overall picture, but without the detail, without the nuance in between the notes. And that the bottom octave, the very fundamental, was kind of a bit flubby. So when I was listening to it with the SonarWorks, with the reference system on, so I've got flat response from the headphones all the way from the bottom right to the top. That bottom octave is just a bit kind of, it's there, but it's kind of undefined, the very fundamental of the note. The same was kind of true of the HX Stomp, with maybe a little bit more detail in the mid-range. I felt like there was more going on in the mid-range and I could hear a little bit more clarity there. That bottom octave is still not perfectly clear. It's only when you switch to the Apogee, which is in another level really, another class of converter, another class of chipset, where I thought the difference started to be noticeable. I felt on its own the Apogee did the best job of just the DI bass straight into the device. I thought that there was a level of clarity in the bottom end that was very defined, and also a very clear mid-range and very clear texture to each of the notes and each of the sounds throughout the audio file. And then finally, the UAD, I kind of felt was very similar to the Apogee, but with its own kind of flavour, its own kind of preamp sound of being a little bit warmer, a little bit less defined maybe in the high mids, but a little bit more warm in the low mids. And the bass was kind of very similar. And I thought the top end was maybe a little bit more shy than something like the Apogee. So I kind of give the Apogee a more modern sound, the UAD a little more old school, vintage, warm sound. And I think that's pretty typical of both of those brands. Both of those brands are known for those kind of characteristics. UAD is known for a more old school analog attempt at sound. I think that happens right from their preamps all the way through once you add in their DSP software and every element of their audio interface and that they have to offer. When it came to adding the U5 before the devices, I felt like that gave it a definite sonic character, but really in terms of the characteristics I've just mentioned, they didn't really change. The Apogee still sounded like the Apogee, but with a slightly different tone coming into it. Same with the UAD, and the Focusrite still had the same problem with the low end and the kind of muddy, undefined fundamental, and not as much clarity on the top end. For me, the Focusrite sound is just a little bit muddled compared to the others, but it's a significantly cheaper device, so I kind of would expect that. But in terms of if you were just to play through it, you'd be perfectly happy with it. It's only once you have those other comparisons to make that you start to think that's not quite as good as the others. It's not bad, but it's definitely not as defined and punchy as the Apogee and the UAD, and even as the Helix. The Helix definitely came a little bit of a step above. So overall then, what are my takeaways? The takeaways are kind of very similar to some of the stuff that I've said before on different topics, and that is that the last part of your chain really does make a difference. It's really marginal in terms of an audio interface, and you have to listen really hard, but once you've got the comparison there, you can definitely tell. And I think the problem only gets exacerbated on the bigger, more powerful and higher end system that you listen to. So if you are in a super pro studio with a very flat frequency response and really great monitors, you're going to notice more a part that was recorded on a Focusrite Scarlett compared to something that was recorded on the Apogee or a UAD device. I think overall, if you are looking for an audio interface to just record some ideas at home, send stuff to your bandmates, maybe track a part or two for an EP or something, not on a super high level, the Focusrite is going to be absolutely fine and you'll enjoy it and it'll do a great job and be a really great musical tool. I'd say the sweet spot is probably the HX Stomp, just because you've got so much extra in it, and the fact it can be an audio interface as well is useful. It's a tool that you can do anything with, and if you've got one already, I would definitely use it if you don't have an audio interface. I do think there is then a gap between those two devices and the Apogee and the UAD. I think the Apogee is really clear, very defined and very textured, and the UAD is kind of the similar thing but with its own characteristic in terms of sound and sonic profile. And that's kind of what I've come to know of UAD, is that they have a certain warmth, a certain character to their sound. And if you're after that, UAD is kind of one of the best ways to get it, because that's the default out of the box tone. If you want to use these devices without any other extra hardware, the UAD is a great option with its plug-in system, but the Apogee is also a great choice with its clarity and definition. So for me, it's kind of a toss-up between the two. If you want the best value, I'd personally choose the Apogee, because you're getting the high quality conversion and the real great clear sound, and then you can manipulate that with whatever amp sim or software you choose to afterwards. The UAD, you are very much paying for the additional software, the additional DSP, and you're not really getting anything extra in terms of actual pure quality conversion and great sounding clean preamps. I believe the truth about buying an audio interface for bass is that there is definitely some gain to be had by purchasing a more expensive unit, but overall you should stick to what really suits your workflow. If you're doing pro work, you should look at one of those higher end options, and if you're just using it for rehearsing, for demos, for things that are not of significant importance or of significant longevity, then using any of the lower level interfaces will not disappoint you. It's only when you directly compare them that you will start to notice the difference. An interface is an important part of the chain, as it's the last thing that converts your sound from analog to digital, but I wouldn't get too hung up on it over the long term. And the thing that you'll notice most, obviously in terms of tone, is everything leading up to that interface. For me, I reckon the ideal thing to do is to aim for something in the higher end of the budget region and just stick with that and be happy and focus on the rest of your chain. And if you want to do more pro work and do it more regularly, then maybe consider stepping up to a top end interface with 2 inputs or more. So that's the truth about buying an audio interface for bass, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd like to know what audio interfaces you're using, and did you think that it made a significant difference between the interfaces? Could you hear the difference, or was it pretty much inaudible? Let me know all that in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and hit that subscribe button and notification bell if you want to see more videos just like this. My Instagram will be linked below me right now, and don't forget that if you didn't already, go back and check out part 1, which is things to consider when buying an audio interface for bass. That will be linked in the description below me right now. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.